Did you get a call from Dad? No luck connecting at all. The ceremony's about to start. Maybe try calling one more time, just in case? Maybe I should. I dialed the phone so my son could hear, putting it on speaker mode. Sorry, I've been unable to answer the phone. Where are you and what are you doing? My mom's funeral is about to begin. We're currently on a trip to Guam with my mom. Is there anything planned after the funeral? We're here for 2 nights and 3 days, so if you can make it, you should come too. It's way better than the brochures we once saw. Guam. Why aren't you here for my mom's funeral? Don't tell me this trip to Guam was the one we were supposed to go on? I told you I had to cancel because of my mom's stuff, remember? Yeah, you mentioned it, but I really wanted to go to Guam, and it seemed a waste to cancel, so I brought my mom instead of you. My mom's been having trouble walking, so she's grateful to travel while she still can. Isn't that great? How is it great that you're in Guam during my mom's funeral? I thought about it after your mom passed. I needed to make sure I did right by my mom while she was still here, to live without regrets. It doesn't have to be today, though. Well, I've used up all my vacation days. I thought it was good timing since I could take bereavement leave. I think this is a gift from your mom, telling me to cherish my own mother. I began to feel silly for even talking to my husband. My son had been speechless from the moment his father mentioned being in Guam, completely dumbfounded. Well, I'll be back soon, then. Oh, okay. I, too, was completely fed up with my husband. The more we talked, the more tired I felt, so I decided to hang up. But just then, a hand reached out and snatched my smartphone away. In that moment, my husband's life was over. I'm Ava, a 54-year-old office worker. My son, Kevin, is 26 and has already found a job and moved out, so it's just me and my husband, Jack, living together. After finishing raising our child, we were enjoying a quiet life, working and spending time together as a couple, but after our son moved out, something significant happened. Will you be home early today? Probably. If you need anything from the store, I can grab it. Could you pick up some toilet paper and dish soap from our usual drugstore? My husband and I used to leave for work at the same time. But once our son moved out, my husband started coming home earlier than he used to, while I often came home late when our son was still living with us. My husband is 3 years younger than me, in his mid-40s at this time. I thought maybe I was no longer in the age group that works relentlessly like in my 20s and 30s. I wasn't finishing work as late as I used to, but neither was I questioning it. If anything, I was grateful that my husband started helping more around the house after our child-raising years were over. However, about a year after our son moved out, my husband dropped a bombshell. Ava, I'm sorry. I've been fired from my job.
Wait, what? Why? What happened?
You know I've been coming home early lately? It wasn't because work ended early, I was actually skipping work. You skipped work to the point of getting fired? Yeah. The company had given me several written warnings to properly do my job. But I thought they couldn't just fire an employee that easily, so I ignored those warnings. And then, skipping work escalated to taking unauthorized absences. Unauthorized absences. But we left the house together. We did leave together, but I'd kill time at a cafe, did shopping you asked for, grabbed lunch, and came back home by noon. Why would you do that? I don't really know. Suddenly, I just lost all motivation for work. The more I thought I needed to get motivated, the less motivated I became. My husband answered quietly, without looking at me. When I looked at his face, it was as if he was on the verge of world collapse. He seemed deeply remorseful about his mistakes. Though he said he didn't understand why this happened, I had a hunch about the reason. Probably, he had burnt out completely after our child rearing was done. And unfortunately, my burnt-out husband had other worsening factors. What were you doing at home, skipping work? Mostly, my mom came over because her house is close by, you know. Whenever I told her I was off work, she came over. We sometimes went out together even before. Having been raised in a single-mother household, my husband deeply valued his mother. It's good to cherish one's mother. I was raised in a single-mother household too, so I cherish my mother as well. However, my mother-in-law, being doted on by my husband, couldn't let go of him. Because our houses were close, she'd often come over, buying things for him, and suggesting they go on trips together, favoring her son over her grandson. However, my husband wasn't without common sense. He'd tell his mother not to come over too often and would take me and our son along for trips, maintaining a reasonable distance. His burnout must have thrown off the balance, making it hard to maintain a proper distance with his mother. My mother-in-law, happy to be treated kindly by her beloved son, didn't say anything against skipping work. The two of them ended up creating the worst synergistic effect, resulting in my husband's disciplinary dismissal. If my husband turned into a mama's boy to the point of getting fired for skipping work, I'd consider divorce. But he was aware of his mistakes and regretted it. And this happened partly because of the burnout from the end of child rearing and partly because his relationship with his mother was well geared in the wrong direction. Besides, we've been together for over 25 years without major issues. Though his mistake was huge, I couldn't abandon him over one fault and reluctantly decided to forgive him. You won't make the same mistake again, right?
Of course not. I'll work hard.
Then, start job hunting right away. I supported my husband's fresh start, and he immediately took action to meet my expectations. Yet, I would come to regret not divorcing him at that moment. He began searching for work in earnest, reflecting on his actions. Seeing his sincere effort in job hunting, I felt reassured that the same issue wouldn't happen again, but it seems the world wasn't so kind. Another rejection. It's okay. You have the experience and skills, there must be a company that needs you. My husband continued to receive rejections through calls, emails, and various methods. The fact that he was dismissed for disciplinary reasons from his previous job was definitely impacting his job search negatively. It seems that a disciplinary dismissal is taken more seriously than we had imagined. It would be best not to mention the dismissal, but in interviews, the reason for leaving a previous job is almost always asked. Since lying in an interview isn't an option, he inevitably has to mention the disciplinary dismissal. My husband silently looked over the rejection notices he received. At first, he looked disappointed, but now, after receiving so many, his expression has shifted to one of resignation. It was my mom, Kathy, who came to our aid in this hopeless situation. Hello. How's Jack's job hunt going? Same as ever. I thought Jack, now that he's serious, would find a job quickly, but the world isn't that kind. Well, jobs are hard to come by these days anyway. What will we do if he can't find anything? About that, I was thinking of asking someone I know if they could help. What do you think? Can he start working immediately? I doubt it'll be that easy. Maybe smooth enough to get an interview. That would still be a big help. We often get rejection emails just from sending in a resume. Alright, I'll check and see. I'm not as young as I used to be, and the person might not be involved with the company anymore. Can you check if it's okay to proceed with Jack? Got it, thanks. Kathy was nearly 80 by then, so her contacts weren't likely to be young either. As she said, there was a high chance they were no longer associated with the company. Without getting our hopes up too high, my husband and I waited for her to get back to us. 2 weeks later, my husband and I went to her house to thank her. Mom, thank you. Jack has got a job. Mom, thank you so much for introducing him to the company. Oh, don't mention it. I just asked him to get an interview. The company said they don't do favors in hiring, so it must have been Jack's enthusiasm that got him the job. Thanks to Kathy, my husband was able to start working again. After receiving nothing but rejection emails, he was eager to work and performed well after joining the new company. However, 2 years after joining the new company, problems have started to arise again. Did you skip work again? I used my paid leave, so it's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. You're starting to slack off again, aren't you? And if you don't work seriously, you're going to embarrass my mom who introduced you. Do you understand? I haven't seen the person mother-in-law asked to help at the company. And she said I was hired without any favors. So, there's no embarrassment, right? Even if that's the case, it doesn't give you a reason to slack off. It's okay. The company can't just fire employees easily. That's what you thought last time, and you got fired. That's right. I've been fired before for slacking off too much. So, I know from experience just how much I can slack off before getting fired. It's like a college student calculating how many more lectures they can skip before failing a unit. My husband might be laughing, but I can't find it funny. He worked diligently at the beginning, but once he learns to take it easy, it seems hard for him to change back to his diligent self. He started to slack off at work again. I overlooked it last time because I thought he was truly remorseful, but this being the second time, I can't forgive him. The word divorce had begun to flicker in and out of my mind. But there was something pressing that couldn't be put off any longer. Is your mother okay? It looks pretty serious. My mother had collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. According to the doctors, given her age of over 80, her condition was dangerous. I arrived at the hospital first, and the anxiety was crushing me, but when my husband arrived, I felt a bit relieved. Despite everything at work, he really does have a kind heart. Or so I thought for a moment until I realized I was mistaken. I thought I was getting out of work, but this looks like it's gonna be a hassle. What are we gonna do about the funeral and all that? I thought I'd misheard and looked at my husband, but he was seriously pondering. He must be simulating the funeral process in his head. Even though my mother is still right here, lying in the bed. If we weren't in a hospital, I'd be yelling at him right now. I gritted my teeth, trying hard to keep the words clawing up my throat from spilling out. Ignoring my effort, my husband added fuel to the fire. So, how long is your mom expected to hold on? What kind of way is that to talk? It's important, right? If the travel dates clash with the funeral, it's gonna be a mess. What? What's gonna be a mess? Well, we'll have to cancel the trip, won't we?
The trip was canceled the moment my mom collapsed, obviously.
Come on. I was looking forward to it. A 2 or 3 day trip should be fine, right? Oh, but if it clashes with the funeral, that won't work. Can't we push the funeral back? The trip was planned first, after all.
Just go home.
I couldn't stand to hear another word from my husband and kicked him out of the hospital room. My husband and I were supposed to go on a trip to Guam in 2 weeks. It was meant to be a getaway for just the two of us after finishing raising our kids, but it was put on hold when my husband got fired from his previous job. 2 years into his new job, feeling more settled, he suggested we finally take our trip. I thought it absurd considering he was slacking off at work, but I too wanted to go. I thought it might be a good change of pace for him, perhaps a way to reignite his motivation, so we decided to go. But with my mother's collapse, it was clear the trip would have to be cancelled. At least, that's what I thought, but my husband seemed determined to go no matter what. I resolved to divorce him once everything with my mom settled down. A week later, my mother passed away. I had hoped to either see my mother recover and be discharged or to wait until her hospital life stabilized before divorcing, but life doesn't always work out as planned. While holding back my sorrow, I prepared for the funeral and sorted through my parents' house. The one helping me was not my husband but our son, Kevin. My husband didn't help with anything concerning my mom. Instead, after she passed, he seemed to find helping out too troublesome and started staying at his parents' house. I wanted to scream at him, but my grief outweighed my anger, leaving me with no energy to complain. Sensing the situation, my son didn't mention anything about his father and quietly helped out. We found an ending note written by my mother at her house. Look at this. It lists people she wanted invited to the funeral and those she wanted contacted after, along with their details. It even notes where everything is in the house. This should make the arrangements and preparations easier. That's just like Grandma. Yes. She was always so considerate and never wanted to trouble anyone. Right. She always put herself last and looked out for everyone else. My son and I ended up laughing as we remembered how my mother would meddle in various people's affairs. Among those memories was a time when my husband was struggling to find work, but I decided to let that memory go. On the day of my mother's funeral, my son and I were preparing for the ceremony at the venue. Ultimately, my husband didn't help with anything and wasn't even at the venue yet. At this point, if he were to come and offer help, it would just be in the way, so it's fine if he shows up after the funeral has started. While I was storing up complaints about my husband and talking to the staff, an elderly person escorted by a woman arrived at the venue before the funeral had even started. She appeared to be her daughter or daughter-in-law. The elderly person was hobbling along with a cane. This individual was an old acquaintance of my mother, who, due to poor mobility, requested to offer flowers before the funeral started. I asked my son, Kevin, to assist them as I was in the middle of a conversation with the staff. I'm talking to the staff right now, so Kevin, could you please guide them? Got it. The elderly person and the woman entered the venue, and I continued my conversation with the staff. When I finished talking to the staff, Kevin returned to me. Who were those people? It's taken care of by the staff now. By the way, have you heard from Dad? No luck connecting at all. The ceremony's about to start. Maybe try calling him one more time, just in case? Maybe I should. I made the call in speaker mode so Kevin could hear. We listened to the ringtone without much hope. After about 10 rings, I ended the call. Just as I thought, no answer. Well, he'll show up eventually, right? He wouldn't miss Grandma's funeral, would he? Kevin and I decided to put my husband's matter aside for now. However, at that moment, a call came back from my husband through the messaging app. Sorry, I've been unable to answer the phone. Where are you and what are you doing? Mom's funeral is about to begin. I'm on a trip to Guam with my mom. Is there anything planned after the funeral? We're here for 2 nights and 3 days, so if you can make it, you should come too. It's way better than the brochures we once saw. Guam? My husband seemed excited about the overseas trip, his voice louder than usual. I turned down the volume, irritated, and sought clarification. Why aren't you here for Mom's funeral, instead of being in Guam? Don't tell me this trip was the one we were supposed to go on? I told you I had to cancel because of Mom's stuff, remember? Yeah, you mentioned canceling it, but I really wanted to go, so it felt like a waste not to go. I brought my mom along instead of you. She's been having trouble walking, and she's grateful to travel while she still can. Isn't that great? How is it great that you're in Guam during my mom's funeral? I was thinking, now that your mom's gone, I need to do right by my mom while she's still here, so I don't have any regrets. It doesn't have to be today, you know. Well, I've used up all my vacation days already. I thought it was a good time since I could take bereavement leave. I'm sure this is a gift from your mom, telling me to take care of my own mom. Talking to my husband was starting to seem foolish. Kevin, upon hearing his father was in Guam, was too flabbergasted to utter a single word. Well, I'll be back soon, then. Ah, right. Like Kevin, I was completely fed up with my husband. The more we talked, the more exhausted I felt, so I decided to hang up. Just then, a hand reached out and snatched my smartphone away. Following the hand to the face, I realized it was the elderly person from earlier. At this moment, my husband's life was over. Caught up in the conversation with my husband, Kevin and I hadn't noticed the elderly person's presence, so we were startled by the sudden appearance. Since the call was on speaker mode, and the elderly person had overheard our conversation, I hurriedly apologized. I'm sorry you had to hear that unpleasant conversation. It's all right. Who's there? Is someone else there? Sounds like an old man, but it's not Kevin's voice, is it? Hey, show some respect. That's the former president and current chairman of the company you work for. What? The chairman? Why would the chairman be there? Remember how my mom asked someone she knew to get you an interview at your current job? That person was the chairman. It's understandable why my husband was surprised. I never thought my mother knew a company chairman, Mr. Schwab. She was always meddling in various matters, so it makes sense she knew many people, including the chairman. Her ending note revealed that the chairman was among her acquaintances and had been listed among those she wanted invited to the funeral. It also mentioned thanking him for hiring my husband. I'm sorry for the late introduction. My husband works for you. No worries, I asked to greet you later so as not to cause any inconvenience, as I insisted on offering flowers first. I've heard from my mother how much you've done to get my husband a job. I just mentioned I had someone I wanted them to interview. The rest was up to them. It wasn't my decision to hire your husband. Hearing our conversation, my husband seemed to believe the person on the phone was indeed the chairman. Though I couldn't see his expression through the phone, his attempts to join the conversation and his heavy breathing made it easy to imagine he was panicking. Mr. Schwab, I apologize, but I've never seen you at the company. Why did you come to the funeral today? Is it so strange for me to attend a friend's funeral? I don't have a duty to be at the company daily because of my position as chairman. But I do attend meetings and the board of directors, so it's not like I'm never there. We just haven't crossed paths. My husband had said he never saw my mother's acquaintance at the company. We thought the acquaintance was a retired former employee. However, it seems it was merely because my husband, who had just joined the company and was slacking off, hadn't had the chance to meet him. Hey, Ava. Did you know your mom knew the chairman? Why didn't you tell me? I was going to. But I only found out after reading my mom's ending note. You haven't been home or helped with the funeral arrangements, nor contacted us. So, I never had the chance to tell you. So, you didn't help with your wife's mother's funeral at all? That's right. So, it's been just me and my son preparing everything, and my husband is currently in Guam. Hey, stop that. It's not like that. This trip was planned in advance, and I do care about your mother. Listening to the conversation, the chairman must have already grasped the situation. However, to clarify things for my husband, I took the time to explain the situation to the chairman politely. I couldn't help but laugh at how flustered my husband was getting. The chairman, having had a bit of fun, then soberly dropped the hammer. You claimed bereavement leave at the company, yet you're actually on a trip to Guam. This amounts to a false claim. We'll deal with the consequence once you're back, but for now, enjoy the precious time with your mother.
No, wait, please. I'll come back right away.
My husband was babbling something, but the chairman ignored him and handed the phone back to me. After hanging up, the chairman had a brief chat with me. The policy on bereavement leave might differ from one company to another, but at my husband's company, it seems to be treated as a special leave, where employees can take time off without using their paid leave, and still get paid for it. It's a very generous arrangement, but my husband's actions make it a serious issue. He informed his company he needed to take time off for his mother's funeral, yet he was actually going on a vacation. During this vacation, he is still earning a salary without using any paid leave. This is essentially deceiving the company for money, which appears to be a significant misconduct. I also informed the chairman that my husband hasn't been diligent at work and that I intend to divorce him. After our conversation, the chairman left. And my son and I thanked him and saw him off. After the funeral, I packed the bare minimum and moved to my late mother's house before my husband returned. The next day, after cutting his trip short, my husband called me as soon as he landed. Where are you right now? I've gone back to my mom's house. I'll come to pick up the rest of my stuff soon, so leave it as it is. What do you mean? Does that mean you're divorcing me? Of course. You should think about what you've done. All right. We'll talk about the divorce more thoroughly later. There's something more urgent I need to discuss first. What could possibly be more urgent than a divorce? It's not something to talk about over the phone. Can you come over to the house? I really didn't want to see my husband. But his urgency piqued my curiosity. And there were some belongings I wanted to retrieve, so I decided to go to our house. I might be facing disciplinary dismissal again. What? What do you mean? My boss called, and they're discussing whether to fire me. He said I should know in advance that it's likely I'll be dismissed. Given my husband's panicked state, I expected something more serious. I was prepared for divorce, so his potential firing was irrelevant to me. However, since my husband was hired through my mother's referral, I thought it prudent to hear out the circumstances and reasons for his possible dismissal. Is it because you skipped work to go on that trip? That's part of it, but the company had already been ordering me to improve my work attitude. You never learn, do you? But I was only given one warning, and I thought I still had some leeway before getting fired. Then, this trip, based on a lie, got exposed. There's no leeway in such situations. It's normal to change your behavior after one warning. So, you got fired because of that? No, there was one more outrageous thing that got exposed. When I was interviewed for my current job, I was asked why I left my previous job. I didn't mention that I was fired for misconduct. I thought I'd be rejected again if I did. And that was called falsifying my resume. You lied even before you were hired? I'm astounded. Listening closely to my husband's story, it seems like not mentioning the disciplinary dismissal might have been okay if not asked, but lying when asked is definitely not allowed. Also, a disciplinary dismissal could be discovered through referrals, but my husband's company did not require it. However, when I spoke with the chairman at my mother's funeral, I mentioned that my husband was fired from his previous job for misconduct. The chairman, combining the lie about the trip and the disciplinary dismissal, must have informed the company. After some investigation by the company, considering my husband's past negligence at work, the decision to dismiss him was made. And here I was, thinking you had some serious news, but it's just that you got fired, right? That's to be expected, and you could have just told me over the phone. I'm getting fired again, you know? That has nothing to do with me since we're divorcing.
Don't abandon me!
Ignoring my pleading husband, I grabbed the items I had forgotten to pack earlier and left the house. Afterward, we divorced. The divorce dragged on to mediation, but it was finalized when my ex-husband gave in. He was also fired from his job. Being over 50, it was too early for him to retire. But having been fired twice made it even harder for him to find a full-time position. Now, he's doing part-time jobs while looking for full-time employment. Starting part-time work has reduced the time he can spend on job search, making it increasingly difficult to find a job. At this rate, the blanks would become longer and longer, and my ex-husband might not be able to find a job. He could embrace being a freelancer, but apparently, he often gets scolded by college students at his part-time job, so it doesn't seem sustainable for his mental health. He could ask someone for help, but we're divorced. My son is fed up with his father and keeps his distance. My ex-mother-in-law is over 80, so she's not someone he can rely on. My ex-husband has lost both his job and his family. He's free to struggle as much as he wants now, as a consequence of his actions. As for me, I've been living at my parents' house since the divorce. I contacted the chairman to apologize for the trouble my ex-husband caused. The chairman said he was the one who asked the company to interview my ex-husband and that the company also had a responsibility for failing to assess his character properly, then he even apologized to me. At my mid-50s, I don't see myself remarrying. I plan to work until retirement and then live a relaxed life. Seeing my grandchildren would be more than enough happiness for me. My son seems to be in a relationship, so meeting my grandchildren might not be too far off. I look forward to that moment eagerly.